Hi, I'm Jay, and today on Jay's World Kitchen, we're making butter chicken. I've had the privilege over the years of making many friends from many different cultures, and one of my favorite dishes that I've got from that is butter chicken. It's one of those dishes that is quite daunting because there's a lot of ingredients and a lot of people are totally overwhelmed by them, but actually it's a pretty straightforward dish, and I'm going to show you how to make that this week. So let's start off with some of the ingredients. For this recipe, you're going to need some peanut oil or any other oil that you want to use. If you don't have peanut oil available, you can use canola oil or vegetable oil. Now, the recipe does call for a shallot. I usually just use a regular white onion, and I actually use about half a cup of white onion or a large white onion. You're going to need some butter, you're going to need some lemon juice, and 1 tablespoon of garlic paste and 1 tablespoon of ginger paste. Now, those I find a little bit hard to find sometimes. You just got to look around in some of your local stores. You usually actually find it in the refrigerated section or the vegetable section, and that's where I usually locate mine. Quite a lot of spices, so you're going to need some garam masala, 1 teaspoon of that, 1 teaspoon of chili powder, a teaspoon of ground cumin, and a bay leaf. More than that, you're also going to need half a cup of plain yogurt. Now the recipe does call for a cup of half and half. I just use heavy cream. 1 cup of tomato puree, a 1/4 teaspoon of cayenne pepper. If you want it a little bit spicy, you can add a little bit more if you want it a little spicier. The nice thing about this is that it has depth of flavor. It's not a hot dish. You're going to need some salt and black pepper, a little bit of ಮೆಥಿ, and some coriander. And obviously we're going to be using about a pound, or in my case 2 chicken breasts that are boneless, skinless chicken breasts that we get from the butchery, and you're going to cut that into cubes. So without any further ado, let's start putting this together. To start off, we're going to heat up our pan to about a medium heat, and a little bit of oil at the bottom. And once that oil is warm, we're going to throw in our onion, and if we are doing shallots, of course we do them at the same time. And we're going to just fry them up gently until they are tender and translucent. When the onion is just starting to go translucent, you're going to add in about 2 tablespoons of butter and 2 teaspoons of lemon juice. We're going to add in there half a tablespoon of garlic paste and half a tablespoon of ginger paste. Give that a good stir, and now we're going to add our 1 teaspoon of garam masala, chili powder, and cumin. And the smell is just amazing right away. And the only other thing you're going to do here is add in your bay leaf. Now the recipe calls for 1. I always add a little bit extra just to get some flavor in there. And you're going to cook that for about a minute just to get the spices cooked in. Alright, and that's been cooking for about a minute, and yeah, don't worry if it sticks a little bit to the bottom. It's bound to do that. Make sure that your heat is not too high, because you don't want to burn anything. But into that, we're now going to add a 1/4 cup of just plain yogurt, followed by 1 cup of heavy cream, And at this point you may want to reduce your heat a little bit just to make sure that you're not going to get too much scalding of the dairy. Of course it's going to cool right down anyway. And to that we're going to add 1 can of tomato paste or tomato puree, and to that I also add a can of tomato sauce. Give us some more liquid in there and make sure it's all nicely incorporated together. At this point you can also add salt and ground pepper to taste. And let that come back up to a gentle simmer. And again, at this point you're going to turn your heat down and just let that simmer while we move on to the chicken. And we just throw in a little bit of oil and then add our chicken. And you want to cook this chicken for about 10 minutes, just until it's lightly browned. And we're going to add a 1/4 teaspoon of ground coriander, a full teaspoon of garam masala, and just a pinch or 1/8 of a teaspoon of cayenne pepper. And stir that in. And after just a minute or two in there, you're going to take some scoops of your sauce that's been simmering and just throw that over. And mix it in really well. And back over at our sauce, which we left simmering, we are now going to add our chicken. And really scrape the bottom of the pan, make sure we get all anything that's slightly dried there in, because it's all just going to add to the flavor. Mix that all in together, and we're going to just leave that to simmer lightly until we're ready to serve. And once your rice is cooked, pour some of your sauce onto your rice, and it really does make a beautiful color. It's an amazing dish. Now obviously, you know, Western culture, we use a fork, so I'm going to taste it with a fork first, but there's one really good way to eat this, and that is so good. The best way to eat this though is using a piece of naan bread, and last week we talked about naan bread, and basically you're just going to take off a big chunk and grab yourself a nice big chunk and have at it. Oh man, that is so good. Butter chicken is definitely one of my absolute favorite dishes. Quick and easy to make, and the nice thing is the longer you leave it, the more the spices just go into that chicken, and the flavor is just out of this world. So I hope you enjoyed this recipe. Join us again next week on this channel. Please remember to like, subscribe, and if you can, please follow the link to my Patreon and offer your support there. We really do appreciate your support. And until next week.